Hi, I'm Dan Satter, the Deputy Athletic Director at Boston University, and joining me is Janet Cohn, the AD at UNC Asheville, and Troy Austin, the AD at Longwood University. And we're going to talk about your relationships with your Chancellor and President. And Janet, how do you set up that relationship and that point of contact?
Well, that's a great question because I've been very fortunate at the University of North Carolina, Asheville, to work for three really dynamic, wonderful chancellors who I thought were just great leaders. But I've also discovered when setting up that relationship, each of them have been different. And with my present chancellor, trust, accountability, and transparency. Tell them what they need to know. Make sure that you keep an open door of communication and be available to, they don't like surprises. So you really got to build it off trust, that they're trusting you to do a great job, and you have to trust them too in the relationship that, they're going to help you as much as you can and really have your back.
Yeah, I think a big part of that too is trying to discover their expectations, how they want to be communicated to. So the president I work with now, he's more quiet, introverted. He doesn't hold long conversations, so calling him up to deliver information is not his preference. He may prefer a text message or an email. I've worked with presidents who like to get face to face and talk about things. So you really work early, and I flat out ask them, how do you want me to communicate with you? Because I believe that alignment and that relationship is crucial. It's crucial.
I'll add to that too, and I think a key, because I think we both have worked for multiple chancellors, president. It's our job to be adaptable to their style, not the other way around. And what I've also noticed too, the chancellors and presidents that are coming through now, like my chancellor texts me. Yeah, and quite often, and it could be, and the good part is I get up early, she gets up early, so I could get a text at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, or I could get a text like last night. I actually texted her and said, "Can you talk?" And immediately it was, "Yes, call me." So that's how sort of the world has changed too. It's more that instant communication, and you kind of know, and you give them the right to say, "No, I can't talk," And she's been really good with me on that too. Like she tried to call me on Friday afternoon, and I missed the call, so I texted her and said, "I'm available," and she said, "No, you need to Friday night off. We'll talk later." So I think that's sort of the difference that we're seeing in our chancellors and presidents now than maybe when I first started out in the business.
How often do you have set meetings with them? And then obviously, as needed, I'm sure fills them in.
And again, getting to know your president or CEO, you understand their meeting desires. My current president doesn't really like to have meetings. And not that I think it's a bad thing, because he does regularly communicate. I'm in his senior cabinet, so we meet weekly, and you can catch him after that if really need be. And if I wanted to sit down with him for 10, 20 minutes, like Janet said, you shoot him a text. So I don't have a regular meeting schedule with him, but he is readily available when something comes up and willing to talk at any time of the day.
I think a key point Troy said too, and both of us serve on the Chancellor or President's senior team, so you're going to have those regular meetings with your senior team. What I've also found out is my Chancellor, and actually tomorrow morning, flying back tonight, 8:30, I have a meeting with my Chancellor. So sometimes we'll have meetings scheduled, and we both reserve the right to say there's nothing to talk about. But my favorite meeting is when my Chancellor and her husband both come to many, many UNC Asheville athletic events. And sometimes when you're just standing on the sideline of a soccer match, you have some of the best meetings because they're in the environment of what's going on. And they have a chance to ask you questions, well, what's this happening? What happened with marketing? What's this promotion? And those are some of the best meaningful meetings you can have when they're there with you.
Or walking around campus. Sometimes we'll walk to an event together and kind of pick their brain as they're walking through campus. And it reminds you how many responsibilities they have. Because I think in that communication, you have to be judicious and respectful of the fact that even the ones, and we've been fortunate to work for CEOs who love athletics, they have academics, they have student affairs, and that's why you have to be mindful of when and how often you communicate and what you feed in the communication, because you don't want to surprise them, but then you also don't want to overburden them with every little detail, which early in my career, I've had a few presidents tell me I don't need to know that exactly. So really kind of learn the timing and understand the rhythm of your presence. And the nuances in the communication are really important.
Oh, that's great.
How much are you communicating directly with the president, and how much are you asking your staffs to communicate with the president and/or his offices?
Well, I think the way we do that at UNC Asheville, since I'm a member of the senior team, my staff have counterparts on other members of the senior team, and they do a lot of that peer-to-peer, because under this present chancellor, not as only is communication important, it's collaboration. Yeah. That's the other C word, that we're going to all work together. And so there has to be communication, multiple levels, and so I think there is some communication. And a lot of times my staff will say, we want Chancellor Grant involved, can I contact her? They'll always kind of run that by, and of course I say yes, or contact her chief of staff, or contact her assistant. But this present chancellor likes to know what's going on, and likes to know if we need her at something or we don't need her at something. So you got to communicate.
Yeah, I mean, and getting to know Chancellor Grant and my president, President Reevely, they do seem very similar. Like to be active and involved. Like to try to help build the program, and we'll meet with recruits or something like that on a recruiting day. So. If that comes up, the assistant who's setting up that visit will work with the president's secretary or something like that in those instances when we're all on the same page of what's happening. But for the most part, if there are any big decisions or questions, that's something I'll grab him about, and just either try to grab him after our senior cabinet meeting, or if it's high level, shoot him a text and see if I can talk to him on the phone.
I'm going to go back to something you mentioned, Janet, about those sideline conversations, and those are some of the best meetings or exposures. You have your president and chancellor see what's happening. Are there other events outside of games that you've tried to bring your president or chancellor to so they could be further exposed to your athletic department and your athletes?
Oh yes, absolutely, and competitions are great because you have a lot of your fans and donors there, and having your chancellor really shows that she's involved and she cares. But whether we're having an awards banquet like our Ashbys, the chancellor and her husband, the great thing about UNC Asheville, we really got a great team, because Chancellor Grant's husband is very involved too, and involved in a good way. I'm going to say that because sometimes we know you can be overly involved. But some of the times too, because we're very involved in our community, Chancellor Grant and I will be in an event in Asheville, and we'll see each other, and we'll obviously be representing the university. Those are the other times that it's really fun to be in that kind of environment. And Chancellor Grant has a style too. She really likes to invite not only her senior staff, but faculty and staff to her home. And so sitting outside sometimes in beautiful Asheville, North Carolina at the chancellor's home, you really have some good conversations then, about everything, about the university and, what's going on in our community.
Yeah, President Reevely's a big history buff, so it's interesting. In informal situations, he'll come to our staff cookout, and people will just talk to him about the history of Longwood, about the history of the Commonwealth of Virginia. So I do think it's important to get him or her involved in moments, in kind of informal meeting moments, because I think everybody can let down their fences. You get to know them, you get to know their personality, the nuances I talked about. So yeah, we like to have him at the staff cookouts. He loves to attend those. I think he prefers to attend those events more than he does a formal banquet, just because he can relax a little bit and everybody's kind of enjoying themselves.
Both of you have been through transitions in your president or chancellor's office. How did you intentionally try to manage that situation proactively?
The chancellor that hired me at UNC Asheville, it's kind of an interesting situation. I went there, a great leader, and just had a great vision of what the university was going to do. I wanted to be part of that. And I think 3 or 4 months into me arriving, he decides to leave, and arrives my next chancellor, Ann Ponder. And what I decided to do is be a little more proactive, because we all know new bosses sometimes like to get their own new staff. And I'll never forget, I was more of the direct, upfront approach, and went to her and said, I know you'll, kind of do an assessment, evaluation of your senior team. And I would really love for you to evaluate me and tell me, would you hire me as your AD? And I remember several weeks later she called me and said, I'm gonna hire an AD, and I'm going, oh no. And I thought she was going to say, not you. She said, I'm hiring you. And, and she was at the university 8 or 9 years. So when Chancellor Grant came, it was much of the same kind of transition. You go in and sit down and have an honest conversation and tell them your philosophy of what you want to try to do to help them be successful. Because Troy and I talked earlier, our job is to adapt to them, right? Yeah. But also our job is to what their vision is for the university, and make sure athletic fits into what the vision of the university is. So Chancellor Grant has a great vision, a great strategic plan, and so we had some of those great conversations, and I think she'll keep me around for a little while anyway. She's a great leader. She's
a great person, and Janet, much in the same way as Janet talked about, just being direct and getting to understand what they think about you, what qualities they look for in leaders. I really am pretty direct about what bothers them, what irritates them, that's how I got to know my current president. Doesn't like to email a lot, doesn't like to have meetings. I said, how often do you want to meet? And he said, I'm just not a huge meeting person. So those little things and knowing, and so I can adapt to their styles. I just asked specifically those questions and asked specifically about what do you want the athletics department to look like? I mean, I have a vision for how we move forward and talk about shared vision and how we focus our resources, but what does he want from that? What does she want from that? Those are important questions to know right away.
When you're making a hire like in a high-profile sport, how involved and updated do you keep your chancellor and president in that process, and do they want to meet with the candidates in your experience?
You go first.
No, yes,
that's great. You go first.
No, so to that point, I was thinking about it in terms of transition. Our current president, Reevely, we had an interim president just before them, and I was making a head basketball hire, and she was heavily involved, and I got feedback from her, but they had essentially finished the search process for our president as I was coming close to candidates, and I point blank said to the interim, I'd like to have them sit down and go to dinner. So we set up another meeting, kind of airport interview, where he can have dinner with him, because I wanted to make sure he was okay with who I was going to hire and who was leading the men's basketball program. So
and basically we do the same thing. Chancellor Grant wants to be in the know, and I want her to be in the know, because if we hire really good people, then we're going to have a really good program, and it's going to be better for the university. Also, she's involved on the front end, as sometimes happens at our level when someone's trying to take one of our better head coaches. She knows what this person knows about the person, what they've done, where they've been, and that really helps you, and when we're trying to maneuver those kind of transitions. I'd like to say too, Chancellor Grant likes to be, I talked to her about assistant coach hires, because I just value, that's the one person you got to always be able to trust as your boss. And if you can't bounce things off of that person confidentially, like situations, and use their experience, I think, you're really missing something. So to be able to go in our office and talk to her, even if I'm hiring an assistant coach, as I'm helping that head coach, here's what we're thinking about doing. I think that really helps you.
Yeah, Janet, I think touched on something key in using their experience. At the end of the day, they're in a great leadership position, and they've had experiences that you can build off of, and people management, and that's probably 75% of the job we do. Other 25% is trying to get $1 out of 15 cents. But I think just understanding life through their lens, leadership through their lens, helps to build on our experiences.
I guess the last thing I would just add to this, and I'm sure Troy and Longwood feels the same way, the relationship part of what we do at our university is so important. And so those conversations about hiring with Chancellor Grant, is very important, because the relationships are what really make our programs great.
Who are you bringing into the family?
Family,
Who are you bringing into the family? Both are small, close-knit communities, and I think it's important everybody understands their fit.
So what's the right balance for a coach or an administrator to have a relationship and get to know the chancellor in that office without them going direct all the time and skipping over the AD or the proper chain of command?
Oh, I actually set it up, I worked to set it up where they understand that I should be the first discussion point. Now they may have, might be a facility discussion that they really want to have, and I've actually even proactively set up lunches with our priority level sport coaches with the president, so they understand they can have some dialogue with them. But I do try to make it clear that the president's not the first person they run to when something comes up.
Well, and I'm with Troy 100%, but the other part I agree with Troy too. There's some days, like right now, we're not on our campuses. And so I have no problem saying I want my associate athletic, actually Brian Ham, one of my assistant athletic directors, attended an interview that was part of this senior team and went on my behalf, and the chancellor was great with that. And a couple things happen for those situations. He gets an experience that will be really beneficial for his career. I can trust him, the chancellor's trusting me to invite somebody to go to something if I'm not there. So I think it's those kind of situations that also help enhance their careers.
Yeah, it builds trust amongst
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah,
I mean, if and Janet doing that, that employee feels like, oh, well, she trusts me to be in that moment and kind of energizes them. So the same thing with the coach as well. It's not like I'm setting up ironclad rules, you can't go to the president, but just in trust and working together, know that come to me first if something comes up.
I think we're going to have a disclaimer here, though. Just like leadership, you'll never be the perfect leader. I think communication is something you have to continually work on. And the one part I've also learned with my boss is, I'm sorry I messed up. And not, to say, I thought this was going to work out this way, it didn't. And, I found out that's the best way to deal with some communication too, that you cannot be afraid that you have to go to them and say, this didn't work out, or I'm sorry, I made a mistake, and here's what I'm going to try to do to make it right. And so I think those kind of communication is important.
Final question for you. When you're looking at whether it's Big South meetings or NCAA legislation, what types of conversations and interactions are you having with the president and chancellor about those?
That's a great one.
That's a good question because, again, you kind of get to know what details they will lock into, and what details they may glaze over, but you also understand, I try to look forward and say, well, here are the issues drumming up, whether it be student-athlete time demands or health and welfare, where it may cost us more money. So you want them to know this trend is developing, and we're going to have to reallocate our resources or add extra resources. Like the Big South a couple of years ago finished a strategic plan for the league, and the presidents, the CEOs were heavily involved in that. But we also had discussions on our campus and saying, will this help us and how does this help us, and here are the particular details about it. Janet, at our last meeting, we talked about that with the new academic unit, so to speak, really got her campus and her president prepped early.
And faculty athletic rep. And, it's funny you mentioned that about college presidents, keeping them, in tune with athletic directors. We just had our Big South conference meetings, and part of those Big South meetings are the athletic directors meet with the CEOs. And this year particularly was really a great time that we had with our CEOs talking about some of those hot topics in college athletics, and it was really nice not only to be with your own president or chancellor, but you learn so much from the other presidents. So you get all these different views, which helps us do our job better. And out of that, we're going to, have some more opportunities to actually work with college presidents. Not just our own, but others within the Big South. So I think that's something I really enjoyed at the Big South meetings recently.
Well, Janet, Troy, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us on Athletic Director U.
Thank you.
Thank you.